Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Recruiting Live. My name is Katrina Kimmin. I'm the managing editor over at Recruiting Daily. And if you are attending Recruiting Live for the first time, just to give you a little overview, if you're waiting for slides or something really formal, you're in the wrong place. So while we use a webinar format, we do not publish this like a webinar because the whole goal of this is to have our guests help you be better at your job. So really this conversation is going to be driven by your questions of my very, very awesome guest, Alison MacKay. Alison, why don't you tell people a little bit about you?
Yeah, no, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I've been in recruiting for about 3.5 years. So I have a background in retail management, and I started recruiting in tech recruiting about an agency in San Francisco. Long story short, I now work at Facebook. I'm in technical recruiting over here, and I also started the Silicon Valley Recruiters Association. That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I definitely want to talk about the Silicon Valley Recruiters Association at some point, but let's start with kind of your background, because you said you've been in this for about 3 years. You're now working at Facebook, which is so awesome. And so what have you learned? So what's something that you wish you had known when you got started recruiting 3 years ago?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that for me, I always think that I should have started recruiting immediately after college. It's in my blood, right? But didn't make that choice, so went into retail management, and getting into the recruiting industry was difficult for me, which is a little bit weird, especially in the Bay Area. You would assume that we're the hub of tech, and to be a recruiter, we need those, right? So I think that one thing that I wish I had known is the community and being able to the community outside of the Bay Area. Part of the reason I started the Silicon Valley Recruiters Association, but the knowledge that there are people out there that are willing to help. And just in the past 6 months, I feel like I've connected with, I think we have 40 mutual friends or something right now. So, even just in the past 6 months, just being able to connect with them and have great conversations just in general about recruiting, and still continuing to learn. I'm a baby in this industry, so.
Yeah. And Michael Townsend, who is a frequent guest here, thanks for being here, Michael. He said, I've been in the same amount of time. So a lot of kindred souls here. And I feel like, honestly, coming into recruiting so recently probably gives you a little bit of an edge because you don't have all those bad habits already stuck in your head. Because really, recruiting has changed a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to candidate experience, and I know we want to touch on that today, but I think that because I have a background in retail management and more customer service, that's why I am the way that I am when I speak with candidates in terms of, you're a person, I'm a person, I've made small talk my entire life, let's talk about who you are, and it helps bridge those relationships better when I am recruiting and talking to candidates. So I definitely agree with you. It has given me an edge to be a short period of time.
Yeah. And Animal wanted to know what your Twitter is. It's at AM_recruiter_SB. That is one hell of a Twitter name.
Initials, recruiter, Silicon Valley. It's a play on Silicon Valley Recruiters Association.
And it actually tells people what you do, unlike most Twitter names.
That's true.
Yeah. As Blake, who just commented, he's like, can you change that? It's a good name.
Hi, Blake.
So we were talking about candidate communication when we were kind of doing our prep call. And, I think that obviously you figured something out when it comes to talking to candidates because you are doing technical recruiting right now. So give me an example. And I know that a lot of people on this call, and you see it in the same Facebook groups I do. I can't get somebody to respond. How do I get them to respond? What's that learning experience been like, and what's your hack for the people on the line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, so it's interesting, my roommate's a software engineer, so we have conversations about recruiting and engineers all the time, and he hates recruiters. It's ridiculous. I'm like, I'm a person. I'm trying to help you. Why do you hate them? But I think that just the mentality, and that what I've learned over the years is that we have such a bad rap in the industry, and so when I'm reaching out to candidates, I'm trying to find any type of something that is in common with them. So to give you an example, I just recently talked to somebody actually earlier this morning. He's a candidate that I'm bringing in for a role over here at Facebook, and he lives in Chicago. And I said, "Oh, are you a Cubs fan?" And he said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "It's okay. You guys beat us." I'm a huge Giants fan, as you know. You guys beat us, but you beat the Dodgers, so I don't even care anymore. And it took me 5 minutes to just kind of build that rapport, and then the rest of the 30 minutes we were talking about the role and what we could do and how we would support. And at the end of the day, I think that, again, it's people connecting people and building that rapport right away and trying to find something in common with them is so key, especially with social media and how they can Google us just as quickly as we can Google them.
Exactly. What sites do you use for your research?
Yeah, so gosh, so many. I mean, it depends on the role, right? So, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but I don't try to send a lot of LinkedIn messages. I use a lot of tools to find emails, and then being able to email them directly. GitHub, Stack Overflow, Quora, Behance, Chlorophyll for the designer roles. And then I Google people a lot, so if people have like an About Me profile, I use Facebook, I use Twitter, so just all of social media.
Yeah. And so are you scraping little details from that for your email?
Yes. Yes. And I think we can talk about tools all day, right? But I think that the amount of tools that we have and the way that you use them, and how best works for you, that's the best way to do it. Jackie Clayton, when I saw her, I don't know if she's on the line, but when we had the HRTX in San Francisco, she was like, I mean, I'm going to use the tools because it's going to help me. Why would I not, right? And so just having that mentality, it's been awesome to see kind of those different tech tools pop up in recruiting.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I shame recruiters for is that they'll say I found their first line of their email. I found your information on LinkedIn, and I would like to reach out to you about my Java role.
Oh my gosh, it kills me. And I think that being in the industry for a short period of time and coming from the background that I come from and the knowledge that I've gained, it needs to be people connecting people. And my roommate actually told me about a story. This guy had reached out to me about a role, and it was a generic email, but it was from a recruiter, and he said, "I'm the GOAT of recruiting, and if you don't know what GOAT is, Tom Brady, greatest of all time." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me! That's awesome." But then the body of the email was just boring as all, and just horrible. And I was like, "Don't work with him. He sounds like an idiot."
The guy clearly wrote 2 sentences, and then the rest of it was copied and pasted. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
We gotta get creative. Of course. Across the board.
So do you go with the creative subject line with the follow-up paragraph, or how do you structure?
So I definitely do the creative subject line, because if you're thinking, I always think about it from their perspective, right? So if somebody's on their phone on the train in Silicon Valley, right, they're going to be looking at this on their email, and so I just monitor how much comes up in a Gmail, for instance, and then make sure that the words that I'm using are going to come up right then and there. And then in the subject line, I tailor the first paragraph and then the end of it. But a lot of my reach outs are just, let's talk. How are you doing? I'm not selling you on any type of job. It's like we use the analogy of dating and relationships in recruiting, and if I'm reaching out to somebody and sending a job description on the first initial reach out, it's like I'm asking you to marry me, and it's not okay. So somehow we're going to shift this mentality.
Exactly. It's like walking up to someone in a bar and being like, "Here's a drink. You want to go home?"
100%. 100%.
Drink.
Yeah. No, you're not down for that? Okay.
We just got a really great question from Nidhi. I think that's how I say it. I talk to her all the time, and I'm like, "How do you pronounce your name?" Anyway, thank you for being here. She said, "Can you suggest?" I got it right. All right. She said, "Can you suggest a few really creative subject lines that you've used?" I know it's by person, but everybody has their favorites.
Yeah, so I can tell you a story of my favorite one. So I reached out to this guy. It was so I'm a huge Apple fan. I should throw that out there too. And so it was when Swift came out, and I reached out to this guy and said, you must be so pumped about Swift. And then in the subject line, or in the actual body of the email, just talked about his experience in Objective-C and doing, mobile development. And so he actually reached back out to me, and, we had a good conversation. But I think it really does have to be with, I do a lot of sports analogies, I think, and I enjoyed your article because you bring sports into it. And I'll always look at their, like, if they, on LinkedIn, if they have, like, for me, I have, like, SF Giants, like Golden State Warriors, so I look at their interests, and then I'm also a skier. So it's just anything that you can see on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. I do the same thing because, at Recruiting Daily, we're talking to a lot of different people, and I'm looking for speakers pretty constantly. And I have, like, my network of people, but I definitely have to source and recruit other speakers to get, subject matter experts. And a lot of times I'll use a subject line that's just like, I was just thinking, or I think I'm reading your mind,
Yeah.
or something that's just completely different. And the other thing that I've figured out is I never ever say, I know you're busy, but, because I'm giving them an out.
Yep, absolutely. One of the things that I've heard that I've done a couple times is just put like RE and then a colon, so they think that they've already talked to you. I did that when I was recruiting for pretty niche roles.
Yeah. And
So,
and whenever I do that approach, my first line is always like, gotcha, or something like, sorry, but, I
yeah,
need your attention. Something
right.
that pulls them right in, that feels more like a storytelling experience than a, I'm about to sell you some shit.
Yeah, I think that that's what it needs to be. I think that it always needs to be just being real. I mean, I might have a problem with this being too real, but I just think that recruiters do have such a bad rap. I mean, when I get real with somebody and just kind of tell a story and have a conversation with them, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, and I'm looking back, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a person too, right?" And
Yeah.
so it's been interesting going from small agencies and working with these awesome startups that are doing huge things to a huge company like Facebook with the brand that they have, right? And so, but even so, I still need to be very strategic in my reach outs because everybody wants to talk to me, and it's interesting. It's very different than what I'm used to. So,
Here's a question though, and I have a bunch of other questions, so I'll ask mine really quick. As a big brand, do you feel like a lot of your applications are people who are good for the role, or do you feel like you're still doing the legwork of sourcing and recruiting more?
So I think both. I think that definitely doing a lot of sourcing and recruiting. I do go through the applicants constantly, just because I think that if they're taking the time to apply for a role, they deserve to have a chance to see their resume be seen. And then I think from that perspective, I still do a lot of sourcing and screening and having those conversations. But as a big brand, for instance, so LinkedIn, I have a problem where I don't like having the notifications on my iPhone. So
Yep.
on LinkedIn, when I have 40, requests to join, I'll connect with everybody just because I feel like everybody wants to chat, and I think that's my due diligence as a recruiter. But when I'm getting reached out to about specific roles that I have nothing to do with, I mean, I won't tell you how many recruiters are over here, but I don't work on marketing. I have no ability, but I'm going to try and take the time to help them. And I think that our role needs to be the education piece of it, right? And so sharing, creating some sort of template that I can just send them back and say, hey, just an FYI, this is what I work on, and this is what I have visibility to. But definitely look at, facebook.com/careers. At least I'm giving them a response, right? I think that
Right.
that's one thing that we need to do better on is actually responding and educating so that we can create a better rapport for ourselves in the industry. And get
Absolutely.
that out of their head that we're, you know, bad people.
Right.
So
A lot of great feedback here. A lot of people saying the re with the colon, that gets them every time. Other people are like, that is so smart. You're right, though. It's playing on logic, right? You think you already are part of this conversation, so keep the conversation going.
yep.
Um, a question from Tatiana. Thank you for being here. She said, do you work with hiring managers who help you reach out to candidates via LinkedIn, or what's your relationship like with hiring managers?
Yeah, absolutely. I work extremely close with my hiring managers. Actually, that's one of the things going from an agency to in-house. I needed that. I needed to be able to know that I was building a team. So, for instance, my hiring managers, if there's a time when I can't get somebody on the phone or we're not having, the response that we need, I will 100% bring them in, even to be able to kind of create the template for them and have it come from them, right? Especially with engineers, they already think that we're bad people. So coming from the director of engineering, I did that a lot when I was doing a couple months ago. So absolutely, and I think that that is also an education piece for the hiring managers and sharing kind of how we work and being able to educate them and how their support can help them. Essentially, I mean, we're doing this for them, right? We're hiring for them, so they should have, wants to be to be in the process. So.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and it goes back to education. It goes back to sharing and just being honest and sharing the due diligence around what we do and how they can help us. So.
Absolutely. Do you do anything to onboard hiring managers to kind of coach them through how it works, what you're doing?
Yes, actually, that's been actually really cool here is I have two new hiring managers that are new to hiring. So one of them, has done a lot of internal transfers, and she's never had to deal with kind of external sources and new people coming onto her team. So being able to work with her and really qualify exactly what she's looking for and be able to have those conversations constantly, that's been really cool. And then include her in the process. And she hired somebody right off the bat, like one of the first people we talked to, which was awesome. So,
Yeah.
and I've heard that never happens. So, but it really does go back to doing the front end work, right, with them and doing that due diligence before you even start talking to candidates. Why would you talk to candidates before you have any understanding of the role and the team and all of that? So that's kind of been my process here. So
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I would encourage anybody who's on the line, shoot us your questions. I'm happy to diverge from this. But I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the Silicon Valley Recruiters Association because I think there are so many people who want to connect with recruiters in their area, who want to have that network of smart people in recruiting that are nearby, or they're looking for that resource. So talk to me a little bit about, when you started it. I know I already know this story, but maybe they don't. And then, kind of what you're aiming to offer and maybe some advice for people who want to start their own.
Sounds great. Yeah. So just to kind of go back and how it started. So I was 6 months into the recruiting industry when I met my co-founder, Jenna Luthi. We could talk how we met, but she had been part of the Northwest Recruiters Association, and she has about 3 more years of recruiting experience than me. And so coming into the industry, like I told you, I should have started recruiting after college. She was like the guru of recruiting. I was like, I'm going to learn so much from you. It was so difficult to get into the recruiting industry. Like, you're going to be my best friend. And so she kind of shared about the Northwest Recruiters Association, which has a huge following, and I know there's a ton up there. And she, asked me if one existed down here, and I said, no, and I wish it did because it took me about 6 months to get into the recruiting industry. And so long story short, it took us about a year to kind of really finalize plans. And my whole thing was that we have to have our brand up there. We have to have all of our social media, all of our website taken care of. We have to have this landing page. And fortunately, we both posted on LinkedIn just about why we started it from our different perspectives. And a gentleman named Andrew Haywood, who's very well known out in the Bay Area, connected with us, and we hosted our first event in July of 2015. And I should preface this saying that the Recruiters Association is for recruiters, by recruiters, and we sold out to 150 people at our first event. And our thought process, it was so cool. It was insane, but it was so cool. And so our thought process was, let's do these quarterly. And then we did a questionnaire at the end of it and said, what do you guys need from us? What will help you? And a lot of the questions were, when's the next one? And we were like, next month. So we hosted actually 11 events over the past year and a couple months, and it's been extremely rewarding. Just because the reason that I personally started it and worked with Jenna so closely is because I never want anybody to go through the experience that I've gone through in the recruiting industry, where it was difficult for me to get into, and then even earlier this year, quitting agency, knowing that I wanted to go into a corporate environment, I had people telling me that I didn't have the experience because I didn't know how to work with hiring managers. And I'm sitting across the table from these people saying, let's look at transferable skill sets, right? And let's look at the bigger picture here and people, with people. And so it's been really awesome. We're actually hosting our next event. I'm going to do a little plug in San Francisco. It's going to be on the power of data-driven recruiting, which I know that we all talk about. So we'll probably stream it live on our web and our Facebook page. But if you are in the recruiting industry, please feel free to join us. We will be hosting events quarterly now. And it's just a way for us to learn and develop. And I think that we owe ourselves so much, for us that are relatively new to the industry. I think that there's a lot of people that have built community over many years, but how many of us, have a place to go? And I think that's the reasoning behind it. And it's exciting to be part of a greater association for, the Association of Talent Professionals that Ben Gotkin is starting. And I'm excited to see where this will go because I'm a huge networker and I just love networking and love talking to fellow professionals because I just learn something from everybody. And that's that's who I am. So
I think that's the best part though, and something that you're really good at, I have to give you kudos on. It's like you will talk to anyone. Like you're very outgoing and you actually you go into it not with an ask, but with an intent. Like I want to get to know you. I want to get to know about XYZ. And I see you pursuing a lot of those conversations. And I think I would imagine that really helps inform your process. Like you said, my roommate's a developer.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to give you an edge when you go into conversations when that's your target audience.
Yeah.
So
I think just in general, I think that people look at me, they're like, oh, you're so busy. And it's like, it doesn't feel like a job to me. Like there's definitely, after work, I'm constantly grabbing coffee with anybody just to chat with them and just educate them. It doesn't matter kind of where they're coming from. I've had so many recruiters reach out to me just because they don't have spaces to learn and develop. I mean, I learned in my agencies, but the only reason that I really learned advanced sourcing techniques is because SVRA hosted an event put on by Mark Tortorici, and he taught us about different ways to do searches, and it was mind-blowing, right? And so that was a year and a half after I started in the industry. So we definitely want to provide that for people that don't have it, as we are all thrown into this wonderful profession, so or find our way here somehow.
Well, and I've talked about this a few times about how there's no education pipeline into recruiting. So inevitably, every person who starts recruiting starts at a completely different place. Yeah, absolutely. Michael was just saying that's how he learned. He watched how others with a lot of success did it, and you just incrementally change your strategy.
Yeah, and joining the different groups. I know Facebook has a ton of groups for recruiters, and just asking questions. There's communities out there, and I love meeting people in person. But the reality is, I mean, you're in Tennessee, I'm in the Bay Area, like somebody else is in New York or Washington D.C. This is why social media exists, and this is why we have these groups to be able to learn and develop with each other. So it's been exciting to see.
Last question just came in. Can you and she read my mind. All right, so she's like, can you share one of your most creative ways that you've used to source a candidate? And my question was more around what's the one place where you find developers where you don't think other people are looking?
Yeah.
You don't have to share all your secret sauce. I know.
No, I mean, it goes back to the Swift conversation. I mean, that was probably my most fun just because it was an interesting situation. But what I did was when I was watching the Worldwide Developers Conference, I just wrote in the hashtag Swift in the search bar. And then all of a sudden, the location San Francisco, it was a startup that I was working with in San Francisco. And all these iOS developers were coming up. And so I was just like, oh, okay, here we go, free meat. And so utilizing that and seeing, cross-functionally looking at their LinkedIn profiles, their GitHub accounts, and seeing kind of who was the best to reach out to, that was one of my most profound success stories just because I was able to get this conversation on the phone. We had a great conversation, and it was really fun. It was more engaging just because we could have a conversation about it. I should preface this and say that my dad is also an engineer, and he was really excited about Swift. And so, having those conversations and just trying to build rapport with this candidate was really, really cool.
Absolutely. I think Pete Radloff was telling me he went to a security conference. I don't think he exactly was hiring security, but it kind of popped this idea in his mind. And he edited resumes. He offered to just edit resumes for free. i.e., he got access to all these resumes, got to have all these great conversations in a utilitarian, helpful environment, right?
Yeah.
And I think your card.
Yeah, I think that I do a lot of networking, right? And so just talking to candidates in person, I mean, you vet out their interpersonal skills right then and there. So selfishly, if they're a fit for my role, I'm going to talk to them and have a more in-depth conversation. And if I think that they could be a better fit elsewhere, then send them to the right person in that sense. So that's another way that I do the creative side of it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's our time. I'm
Okay.
always amazed, like it just flies, just like a conversation would, right?
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. Allison, thank you so, so much. Really appreciate you sharing your experience. Anybody who wants to find Allison on Facebook or anywhere else, that's how you spell her name. It's right here or here, wherever the camera, however this recording is working. Next week we will be back at our regular time at 1 p.m. Eastern. And our guest is Sedef. Her last name starts with a B, and I'm not going to butcher it in front of all of you. But she's a proactive talent solutions, and we're actually going to talk about building recruiting personas for your high volume hiring process. So, yeah, we will see all of you next week. All right. Have an awesome Friday.
Thank
Allison,
you.
thank you again.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, guys.